everyone, welcome back at Charlotte from At Charlotte's House. Welcome to episode 6 of my Flip House series. This week I am going to talk a little bit more about progress that I have made throughout the house, plans that I have for upcoming projects, and what I'm planning to use my contractor for. Stay tuned. Recap what I have done in this house. I have removed miles of wallpaper, and that is still continuing. So I'm going to bring you upstairs and I'm going to show you some of the wallpaper that is coming off up there. I also want to talk you through some of the projects that I am beginning to plan for in the future, as well as the few places that I desperately need some help from my contractor. So I'm going to talk you through that as well. My goal for this house is obviously to spend as little as possible. The finances of this flip house really rely on me doing as much of the work as possible, but there are a few places that I just think it makes more sense to hire out. I am also planning to have my drywall crew come through, and I am hoping that they can give me an estimate to help clean up all the spaces in this house that have been sort of hacked apart, and I think they will do a better job with any taping, mudding, skim coating. Let's walk around. My assistant came to work with me today. This is the living room, and I have removed all of the wallpaper from here. This is an example of a wall that needs a little help. This is the dining room, and I finished removing the wallpaper in here just the other day, and it's still in rough shape, but there is no wallpaper. For all these walls that used to have wallpaper, you can still see that they're a little bit dirty. What I will do before I paint is I will go over them with a sponge that has some water and white vinegar and just clean those up, and then I will probably end up using a good oil-based primer just to seal those off. This is another area where I could probably muddle through, but because I'm dealing with plaster and lath in a lot of this house, I think my drywall guy will probably be better trained to come in and patch up these holes. So I would love an estimate from him. Another project that I have to do is assess all of these radiator covers. Some of them are great, like this one. I don't mind this at all. I would probably paint it white so that it blends in with the walls, but there are other radiators that need a little bit more help, so I may have to build a few of these from scratch. If you recall from my first video, they really did a number on a lot of the windows and the window trim. So the windows themselves are new and updated, which is great news for me, but the trim in a few places has just been destroyed. So I will have to come through and replace the trim, which is no big deal. I may have my painter come behind me and caulk and paint the trim, just because that's sort of fussy painting and I'm not great at that. I am beginning to suss out the kitchen. My plan right now is to keep this bank of cabinets right here. There's nothing wrong with them. They're in the right space. They work great. I would love to swap out the cabinet doors just to make them a little bit more modern. My goal is to remove this tall cabinet that's at the end and replace it with a lower corner cabinet and an upper corner cabinet. And then essentially I'll wrap the cabinets around so that this wall will have an oven and 2 cabinets on either side. And then depending on what we can do on that wall, maybe some uppers as well with a microwave or something. This also brings me to the first project that my contractor may or may not help with. Right now, this is a former pantry that they converted to a powder room. I love the fact that there's a bathroom down here, but it is sort of a tricky space. And I don't love that the door essentially opened onto the sink. So what I have asked my contractor to price out, it may not be worth it for me, is to open up this wall and to create a pocket door. If there is a pocket door, then all of a sudden that little powder room doesn't take up any space and it's gonna work great. If it's too expensive, then this isn't awful, especially without that island there. It's a little bit easier to get into this space. So that is TBD. Let's go upstairs because that is really where I have started working the most right now. So I'll show you around and give you a sense of what I have done, what I still have to do, and I think what will be the biggest project for my contractor. This is one of the upstairs bedrooms, and you can see the same issue with the window is present. They've taken off the top trim piece. So I will have to replace that. I will probably end up replacing all of the trim if I'm being honest, because that is really in bad shape. Here's an example of a radiator that I will paint for sure, but I will probably build a little cover for that just to close it off and to make it a little bit easier to work with in the room. This is another window that they have blocked up. There's a bunch of windows that they blocked up and they didn't do a great job patching it. I think their solution was just to cover it with paneling. So here's a place where my drywall guy, I'm hoping, can come and clean that up a little bit. I will add baseboards back in. And then I also uncovered this beautiful door. This looks like the only original door in the whole house. It is unbelievably sad that they covered it with paneling, but I will take that off its hinges and strip it down so that at least we have one beautiful old door left. And then across from that, it's this really sweet built-in dresser. They had covered that with paneling too, and I will clean this up as well. I think that is wonderful. We need to put a little drywall across the bottom. And again, if I have my drywall guy come through and take care of all of that, I'm hoping it will take him a couple of days. If I were taking care of all of it, I think it would be a couple of weeks. The big project in this room is to rework the closet. So they have added this wall here and put a sliding door. And honestly, it doesn't really get you that much. They've built this little weird shelving niche. And what that essentially does is it makes this whole part of the closet wasted space. Same with this space. I know it's really dark, but this appears to be the original closet. You can see where the door is framed out. So my goal is to open all this back up, get rid of this weird little niche, and then we'll have one closet in the corner with a little bit of an opening and a window in the back so I can put a little bench there. That's a nice little seating area. And then another closet on that space as well. And all of a sudden, this room feels a little bit bigger and a little bit more interesting. The ultimate juggle for me with this flip house is balancing my budget, balancing my timeline, and balancing my expectations. This is not a house that I am going to live in, so there are certain choices that I would make for myself that I am not going to make for this house right now. I also have to consider what is work that I can do all on my own, which requires zero money. I'm not writing a check to anyone for that. And then the work that I can't actually do, but I think needs to happen. There were a bunch of windows that are blocked up in this house, and I get it. We're right on top of the houses on either side of us, so it gives a little bit of privacy. It makes the rooms a little bit easier to set up. This window in the primary bedroom, I think makes sense to open up. And here's why. This closet right here is not great. I don't love the way it looks. I think it'll make it feel just a little bigger and more substantial. Another window that they covered up, and this one they covered up so badly. Look at it. If this was my house and budget was a little different, I might open up more of these windows. This room is certainly fine without it. That window would look right out onto the neighbor's house. And there is that one large window that looks out on the backyard. So it's not the end of the world. It would have been nice, but for me right now, that's gonna stay covered. The last big project for my contractor is this bathroom. I don't have the budget to completely rework the bathroom. In theory, I could come into this little office space and make a much larger room, but I don't have that budget. So what we're gonna do is we are going to remove the vanity because of the way the plumbing comes in, which is through the wall, not ideal. What we are planning to do is we are planning to open up this wall and borrow space from the closet behind it. This wall is gonna go back this way, so now this bathroom is gonna have sort of an L layout, and then the vanity will sit against the wall over there. We won't have to move the drain line. We hopefully won't have to move the water line. If we do, that's a little bit easier to move. We'll go back into the wall. And so then you'll come in and you'll turn the corner and the vanity will sort of sit in here. It's not ideal, but it's better than nothing, and it means we're working with the plumbing as it is. This room will get a little bit shorter because the wall will come in here. I think we'll probably keep this little storage space. So imagine there's a vanity right here. So now to the left of your vanity, you have a little bit of storage. This will become part of the bathroom storage. Honestly, I think that's a great budget solution for the bathroom. I'm still waiting on his estimates, but I think that's work that has to get done. I am gonna do the preliminary demo just to make it easier for him to get back in there.
So let's get started. Obviously, I'm going to start by putting on all of my safety gear. This is going to be a dusty, nasty process. The first part was pulling apart the obvious things that I could see, and that meant unscrewing the doors to those little niches, removing the shelves, and pulling off the door trim. This is the first time that I've done really kind of significant demo, and it's so satisfying. I'm sure a real contractor would just tear into these walls, so I'm probably being too methodical, but I wanted to pull it apart safely. I wanted to make sure that I didn't create any problems for myself in the future, and I also wanted to work in small enough increments that it would be easy for me to get it down into the dumpster. Can we talk about the carpet in here, guys? Ugh, I cannot wait to pull it up. It took a little finagling to figure out how these sliding doors were in place. Ultimately, I noticed that there were some tracks on the floor that I had to unscrew, and then they were sitting up onto a rail that is above the header. And once I figured it out, they came off really easily. They had one long board mounted to the back of the closet. I am going to save that board. I'll figure out a project for that in the future. And this was just screwed in place on some L brackets, essentially. Now it was time to figure out what exactly they had done with these little bookshelf niches. These little storage nooks are so peculiar to me. I guess I understand the thought process of putting a closet against that whole back wall, but these little boxes take up so much space and they waste like half of the room behind it. So I'm really happy to get rid of them, and I think there's a better way to do this. The right storage area was a lot easier to remove because it was tucked between actual 2x4s because they had built that false wall. Essentially, the box was built out of, I think it was 1/2-inch plywood, and then they hammered it in place right into the 2x4s that essentially are framing out the block. So there's nothing supporting it on the backside. It is just a tight squeeze, and there are a lot of big heavy-duty nails. Now, moving on to the other side, this was the original closet. When I was pulling apart the closet on the left side, I noticed that one of the original paneled doors was there, and you guys, they just cut it in half. I don't know why. I can't tell for what purpose that served, but it just is so sad to see a beautiful door like this just hacked into. Don't do this. On this left side, I did exactly the same thing I did on the right side. I removed the trim. Then I started to pry the box loose just enough that I could get to the nails and pull them out of the wall. This side was a lot fussier because it was on a wall that is plaster and lath. I was able to remove this second box, and I am feeling real pleased with myself. I can now tell that this corner was the original closet. Here, let's pull you back. This was the original closet, and so then they added this wall here. And let's go look inside. Good news is that obviously this is not structural, so I can remove, you see how they framed it out in this opening? And then they framed it out on the wall where the closet used to be. So none of these here are structural, and this can all come right out. This is the fun part, removing a wall. Again, I'm probably being too cute about this whole thing, but I just wanted to make sure that I didn't remove part of the ceiling, part of the floor. I wanted to go slowly and surely. So I removed the trim, and then I removed the track that the sliding doors had been on. I slowly started to remove the drywall so that I could get to the framing behind it. Some of it was pretty loose, so I just needed to give it a good kick with my boots or give it a hit with my hammer. And then there were other places that were much sturdier, so I grabbed my reciprocating saw and I went ahead and I cut through the nails, holding it in place on the bottom. I get a D- for my camera angle on these shots because you can't see anything I'm doing on the other side of the doorway. So that's the door frame itself, and now it's time to move on to the rest of the little wall. Essentially the same process. I'm using my reciprocating saw along the bottom, removing the drywall if need be, and just going back and forth with my hammer, the reciprocating saw, and eventually this side came out as well. You can't tell because it's covered in drywall dust, but there is perfect hardwood floor tucked in that corner back there. I'm so excited to pull the carpets up in this house. I have two crowbars that I use for this. One is pretty small, so it can get into tight nooks and crannies. The other is a little bit bigger, and I use that for heavy-duty work. I'm keeping this clip in just so you can see, again, how bad the camera setup is. I'm removing the drywall above the door frame here, but you can't see that. Nope, you can't see any of that. Enjoy. I'm trying to be better about cleaning up my workspace at the end of each day. So this is all of the debris and stuff from the demo in here.
This room feels 100% bigger and more roomier already. I think this is the original layout of the space. So having a window back there, I think is going to be lovely. The big question for me, and I will reach out to my agent for confirmation, is whether or not she thinks it's worth framing out and creating a second closet on that side of the room. This house was built in the 1920s. Obviously, closet space was a little bit different back then. So currently there is one fairly small closet in this room. And obviously the next homeowner could bring in furniture. They could take over that little room at the end of the hall, turn that into a closet. But my goal is to make this as easy as possible for the next homeowner. So it may be worth creating a closet on that side of the room. We shall see. I'm not gonna lie, I really love the aesthetic of the original room. That green on the trim and the baseboards is beautiful. And this is something I would totally do in my house now. It just goes to show that everything comes back at one point or another. Here's another view of this wall. So the question in hand is whether or not to create a second closet opposite the one on the left. Over here in this corner, it means that that window would sort of be centered on the wall between the two closets. And that could be really nice, but I love having that open space there. I can picture a little chair in the corner. That window is gonna brighten the room so much. This is the last room of wallpaper in the house. So I will start on that next week. But the demo is done. I'm ready for my contractor to come in and take care of that window. That'll happen in the next week or two. And I'm feeling really good about today's progress. And don't worry, they definitely didn't remove that wallpaper. They just put the purple stripes right on top of it. I know this week was a little bit weird and there was a lot of catch up to be done, but I appreciate you coming along on this whole process with me. I am sharing this real time, which means that some weeks it is just busy work. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you go back and watch my previous episodes. I've talked all about the plans for the house. I've done some landscaping. I painted a shed. You can get all caught up. And then next week, it'll be a surprise. Have a great day, everyone. Third time's a charm. How is this?